Okay, let us begin. Uh, a very warm welcome to all of you in the webinar series organized by RC28, Sociology of Everyday Life, Indian Sociological Society. Today we have with us Dr. Runa Das Chaudhuri. She is trained in sociology and has a PhD from the Center for Studies in Social Sciences, Calcutta. At present, she teaches as an assistant professor in sociology at BHK Mahavidyalaya, West Bengal State University. Her work has been published in several journals, including South Asia, Journal of South Asian Studies, Contemporary South Asia, International Sociology Reviews, Culture and Society and Culture in South Asia, Oriental Anthropologist, Journal of the Asiatic Society, Hakara, Entanglements, Experiments in Multimodal Ethnography, Interasia Cultural Studies, as well as in edited monographs, including the Sarai Reader 09 projections, South Asian nationalism reader, and many others. Her areas include, her research areas include social urban consumption in India and cultures of spiritualist practices in late 19th and 20th century Bengal. So over to Dr. Runa Das Chaudhuri for a lecture, which is titled You Are Gold, the role of workwear jewellery commercials in disempowering urban working women in India. A very warm welcome, ma'am. Please begin your deliberation.
Thank you, Dr. Pinaki Roy, for that introduction. I hope I am audible. Thank you.
Yes, you are audible.
Thank you. I would take this opportunity to thank the organizer, Research Committee 28 of Indian Sociological Society, namely Sociology of Everyday Life, for organizing this online lecture. I also thank Professor Maitri Chaudhuri, President ISS, for making this occasion a formal one and permitting the flyer to be posted in the website of ISS. A very special thank you to Professor Sanjay Roy for having encouraged and motivated me to present my research findings on this platform. So thank you so much, sir. And very good evening to all who are present on this platform. As Pinaki has already mentioned, this is part of my larger studies on sociology of urban consumption in Kolkata. So my paper is titled You Are Gold, the role of workwear jewellery advertisements in disempowering urban working women in India. So the You Are Gold is basically the tagline of a multimedia campaign in 2021, which was rolled out by the World Gold Council in association with the Gem and Jewelry Export Corporation Council across on Indian television, digital, social, and OTT platforms to attract millennials and Gen Z to gold jewelry. Conceptualized by the McCain Group, the advertisement showcases a young urban couple leaving the restaurant after dinner. The man gives his girl his coat as he steps aside to take a call. Curious about what the dinner celebration was all about, the girl feels his coat and finds a jewelry box in the pocket. She assumes it is a ring and tells the man that it is not the right time with their startup business in the pipeline. Her partner then tells her that the call was an investor approval, goes down on his knees and asks her if she would be his business partner for the same. He opens the box to a pair of golden earrings. The girl, now smitten, accepts the starting offer as she chuckles, asking whether she would get a bonus as well. The advertisement ends with a voiceover. Every moment, and I quote, every moment that makes you you deserves to be celebrated with gold. You are gold. End quote. Importantly, the You Are Gold campaign attempts to popularize the adoption of gold among millennials, showcasing that relationships and milestones deserve to be cherished with gold. The advertisement aims at convincing the value-conscious and the brand-conscious young urban Indian woman the idea that gold is an extension of her personality which needs to be celebrated, but with a contemporary. In this commercial, the exercise of individualized female agency comes to play over the initial reluctance to accept a perceived marriage proposal and its deferred acceptance. It is interesting to know that in the You Are Gold campaign, the educated working lady has no qualms in being referred to as gold, an object. Rather strangely, her classic gendered habitus seems to be at home with the old patriarchal distinction between a woman and a human, which is blatantly detrimental to her own personhood. This leads to the question whether the projected make-believe idea of women's empowerment marketed by advertisers, jewelry brands, is merely a facade and leads instead to their disempowerment in the launch bureau. Now, if you look at India, we'll find that um, I need to yes. So in India, in recent years, Indian jewelry, if you look at the Indian jewelry sector, that has witnessed the advent of branded gold and diamond workwear jewelry. It is a relatively new market segment targeting urban working women. Though smaller than the largest category of sales, namely the traditional matrimonial category, the lightweight workwear jewelry business is estimated at around 1.5 lakh crores and is emerging to be a major player, and it is expected the wedding segment by contributing 49% of the total jewelry market by 2020. This is by Satyanarayan in 2019. The segment made its headway with Mia, which is an abbreviation for Me in Action, a sub-brand launched by Tanishq, a Tata enterprise, in 2011. Other players included Caraclean 2008, Bluestone 2011, and Candia, which is a sub-brand of Kalyan Jewelers, in 2013. So, several age-old regional players like the 83-year-old PC Chandru Jewelers, with its roots in Kolkata and boasting of 54 showrooms across 8 cities in India, launched its everyday wearable gold light collection in 2012, while Shenko Gold and Diamond, with a legacy of 8 decades and operating in 150 plus showrooms in 14 Indian states, launched its lightweight jewelry in Everlife in 2015. The multimedia campaigns and commercials of these workwear jewelry lines demonstrate a studied intention of alluring their intended clientele with lightweight and sophisticated designs, idioms that ostensibly suit their classy gendered habitus. In fact, the contemporary of gold ornaments in the commercials reveal how women articulate themselves and necessarily intertwine their claims, I would say, over others through a non-human material. In this article, I seek to untie the sinews of present-day constructions of urban Indian women in relation to the consumption of gold jewelry, of jewelry made of a yellow metal, namely gold, and precious stone, namely diamond. Uh, Gold jewelry here, which has otherwise over years only persuasively revealed one's power to act when worn during weddings, today losing ground to a growing market for diamonds. The latter instantly, slowly making space in the dressing room of the middle class woman from what was traditionally a preserve of elite. This has implications for the dominant perceptions around the modern urban Indian woman whose gendered habitus and positions in preferential jewelry help them seek, express, confirm, and ascertain their sense of being through what they have. The positioning of an intersectionality of class and gender of a niche clientele also seems to bear ramifications for the shaping of womanhoods of urban working women. While it's true that most Indian women look at gold as a financial investment serving purposes of social security, there is a growing tribe among them, notably the working women who are investing in precious bling to wear every day. And interestingly, if we look at some of the don'ts of Mia, a workwear line of Tanish, some of the don'ts listed were not to overkill in terms of glitter, not to wear distracting pieces, that is, overpowering, clinking jewelry, and not to wear impracticality, in avoiding any pieces that may hinder work in the workplace. So, fine jewelry, which can be styled with just about every outfit, is cool, casual, and affordable for women on the go, qualifies as workwear jewelry. The narratives which advertisements of branded workwear, diamond, and gold jewelry endorse, I argue, are emblematic of their supposedly empowered womanhoods albeit, and I add this qualification, albeit related ones. So this article first takes a review of literature, second it outlines a method of study, third it maps shifts in gender ideologies in the portrayal of women depicted in the workwear jewelry commercials, and whether these ultimately lead to commodifying women, reducing them to objects. Fourth, it undertakes a thematic analysis of workwear jewelry advertisements to reveal how urban working women paradoxically they're all willing to accept their belated personhood and how these contribute what I call unsure freedoms. And lastly, the article critically probes whether the gender habitus of urban women serve as conduits in reproducing and valorizing ideals of traditional femininity and end up in disempowering them. So the first subsection I've titled Review of Literature. The Gems and Jewelry Market Report of 2022 states that the jewelry market, which stood at $78.50 billion as in 2021, is expected to grow with a CAGR of 8.34% to reach $119.80 billion by 2027. Also, an estimated rupees 450 crores is expected to be spent in multimedia advertisements by jewelry brands to woo customers and boost jewelry sales. Given the recent trend of promoting jewelry purchases in print and multimedia advertisements by celebrating new occasions like, Valentine's Day, Women's Day, is commerce which I think deserves academic attention. It is instructive to note that the advertising analysts have deemed it significant to examine a bathing soap commercial in the bikini-clad little girl prancing around a waterfall in the late 1970s, or the surf detergent commercial showing the outgainer bargainer in Lalitaji in the 1980s, and the condom advertisement of Kama Sutra in 1990s. Others have thought it prudent to critically study commercials and commodities like a wall paint brand in Asian Paints, a scooter in Bajaj Sunny, a chocolate in Cadbury, dairy milk, and a spice mix in Everest Pav Bhaji Masala. But jewelry, what Jacob Korean, the chief operating business manager of Tanishq, calls one of the few Walmart-proof and China-proof businesses, and its advertisements have received scant attention. It can be counter-argued that the brand of gold and diamond jewelry is a more recent phenomena, with gold jewelry chains in India gaining over 35% of the market share as of 2021, driven by evolving consumer preferences and government regulations encouraging this industry to become more organized. Yet, studies on consumption of the ostentatious metal in gold and the precious stone in diamond have been few and far between. Of course, we do have some scholarship, and scholarship on gold has focused on how the social life of gold is gendered. You have Mehrotra's study in 2004, the ways in which gold articulates person and personhood, Ajay Gandhi in 2013, how the gendered division of labor in invisibilizing women's work in chain weaving as leisure activity is being resisted by women gold workers. You have Soni Sinha's study in 2011, and how in colonial times the laboring class negotiated with the Mysore Mines Act deployed in the coaler minefields. You have historian Janki Nair writing in 1995. With the consumption of diamonds in India, studies have focused on how the cultural elites actually patronized a certain distinction in being conspicuous from what is being practiced by the rich and the wealthy. Roy Chaudhuri and Mojumdar's study in 2006. Yet another study has scrutinized the behind of a feminized world of diamonds, revealing in turn the embeddedness of gendered relationships and discourses within the trade, which construct masculinities and the identities of diamondiers. And this is a very influential study by Westwood in 2000. So while themes of personhood, property, production of gold and diamond have received attention, it is surprising that both print and multimedia jewelry advertisements have been left relatively unexplored in scholarly discourse. Of course, not to discount the argument on auto-orientalism which Mazzarella offers on the heritage clothing print advertisement, where the jewelry adorned woman mediates her cultural self-discovery through ethnic chic design, or Brossius's reference to Swarovski jewelry as an element in what she calls A-grade weddings in liberalized India. So these are studies which, while using print media advertisements of women decked in jewelry, have interpreted an adorned woman as the sacrosanct locus of Indianness, or made a passing reference to jewelry. The lack of pursuing a full-length study even on bridal jewelry can perhaps be countered by the fact that in Indian culture, gold is considered as an auspicious and sacred metal and used as a symbol of blessing and prosperity from birth to marriage. And by corollary, I think business around extremely pure object is contemplated too sacrosanct to invite critical study. So I move here from here on to the method that I have adopted for my study. The data for the present study included 11 multimedia advertisements of gold and diamond jewelry brands in English, 9 in Hindi, and 3 in Bengali, which were released on television channels and internet platforms in India between 2017 and 22. The advertisements were chosen on two criteria, namely that these had to be number one, multimedia audiovisual jewelry advertisements, excluding any print media commercials of the brands chosen. And number two, it had to be multimodal, that is containing both visual and verbal cues. The advertisements were of seven pan-Indian jewelry brands, namely PC Chandra Jewelers, Tanishq, Senco Gold and Diamonds, Carrot Lane, Blue Stone, Forever Mark, and Cantia, and Kolkata-based regional jewelry brands, namely MP Jewelers, which dates back to 1945, and Anjali Jewelers, which was launched in 1992. Now, the rationale for including workwear jewelry of these two regional brands is to examine whether gender ideologies implicit in the marketing of these significantly differed from pan-Indian ones. The fact that many of the jewelry advertisement campaigns were in English hint to the advertisement's perception that all urban discourse paradoxically has to be in English by tacit Anglophone collusion so that they may inhabit a desired cultural universe. It's also instructive that many of the advertisements in Hindi were interspersed with English dialogues corroborating the idea that a certain claim to the urban cultural habitus underlines workwear jewelry campaign targeting the urban educated working woman. Qualitative study scrutinizes basically three areas. One is whether newer trends of varying success by the so-called economically independent and henceforth empowered urban working woman through workwear, gold and diamond jewelry, her growing autonomy. Two, whether the market segment of workwear jewelry becomes supposedly unknowing vector for the commodification of women's identities and cleverly manipulated under the guise of their very inspiring characters. And third, whether these lead to reinforcing a more mutated and reflexive patriarchy, which does grant autonomy to women, but only at specified junctures in their individual biographies. For these purposes, I have used a thematic approach to analyze commercials, beginning with an initial code list that was developed deductively from research questions. These codes were developed from numerous readings of the data and more frequently represented themes in the advertisements. Advertisements in Hindi and Bengali, I transcribed and translated the text verbatim before applying codes. These advertisements were selected for initial coding. To capture the variation present in the data set, this initial sample included 4 pan-Indian and 2 regional jewelry campaigns. To further refine the code list again, 6 advertisements chosen were coded again. The coding was done twice, actually. And second round of coding ensured that all relevant data had been indexed by the 9 codes that had been devised. I subsequently coded all the 23 advertisements analyzing the Max Quarter 11 software. So analysis began with the retrieval of text coded with the commonly used codes that apply to most advertisements. For example, buying, gifting, wearing ornaments, with less and more concrete codes like presence of male characters, in the workwear advertisements, or the use of first person, I, my, the pronoun you in describing women. And to validate the findings by using the software, I also subscribed to Norman Fairclough's critical discourse analysis, focusing particularly on dimensions of personalization, adjectives, and mood choice, whether the analysis of gender rhetoric through Max Warder and CDA substantiated each other. Now, in the choice of methodological tools of Max Warder and CDA analysis, a detailed and meticulous focus on women's individual experiential universe as represented in the jewelry commercials have been undertaken. But if we were to Recollect Irving Goffman's now famous truism that the job of the advertiser and of the society is that it transforms otherwise opaque going-ons into easily readable forms. We presume that the context of advertisements they're calling are the larger social, cultural and historical structures in which these contexts are embedded. So the aim here is not to treat women's lived experiences depicted in the advertisements as both text and context. Rather, the dynamics of how societal norms, values, and stereotypes intervenes and shapes women's experiences is what foregrounds the study. So I move to the third section, which is about, and I've titled this Mapping Shifts in Jewelry Advertisements. Quick review of the many contemporary gold and jewelry brand commercials. They show the buying and gifting of precious metals and gems like gold and jewelry. They revolve around family occasions and weddings and festivals. Many jewelry brands rope in celebrities for endorsing their heritage and wedding jewelry lines, and the context remain largely confined to traditional occasions. Advertisers exploit to their benefit collectivist orientation of Indian society by emphasizing on family harmony, which advertisements around family occasions portray. The advertisement of Divyam festive heritage range of Tanishq released on the occasion of Diwali features the Bollywood actress Deepika Padukone being gifted jewelry by her real life parents. Another Bollywood actress Vidya Balan is decked up in bridal jewelry for her supposed wedding in the Shenko gold and diamond advertisement, and there are many more of this sort. So, have a tendency in jewelry advertisements to always depict family occasions with women adorned in precious ornaments is undergoing a slow yet perceptible shift. Indian jewelry brands are choosing celebrities to endorse their workwear lines, which are tailored for the bold, independent, inspiring, and fearless young Indian woman. Celebrities embody popular meanings of the time. Consumers connect with these meanings by consuming the products endorsed by these famous figures. And advertisers have rather discreetly reckoned it prudent, I would say, to choose celebrities. So the same Deepika Padukone advertises for the Swayam, meaning myself range of the Tanishq brand, in which she gives herself exquisite jewelry to celebrate each of her own achievements. Swapna Varman, the brand ambassador of Shenko Gold and Diamonds Everlight collection, is demonstrated skill training and practicing as she rhetorically silences a male voiceover, chiming sexist messages. In an overture to silence her detractors, Swapna puts a finger on her own lips as she utters, "Don't take me lightly." But the Swayam and the hashtag Send for Powerful Woman project the woman who is proud, who is very proud of her own achievements. They do not want to wait for jewelry to be bought for them by others, but can buy these wealth ahead for themselves. It becomes clear that advertisers, in featuring Deepika as a rather stereotypically glamorous celebrity endorser, is using the trope of attractiveness, while in depicting Swapna, they are using a nonconformist icon banking on her trustworthiness. So these small ripples of change in the portrayal of women suggest a shift in the underlying gender ideologies in jewelry commercials. The copycat characters in workwear jewelry advertisements in the Max Border, however, reveal that most of the advertisements of Candier, Bluestone, Carotene, and Mia by Tanishq had non-celebrity characters. Rather, these were replete with narratives of ladies, young, urban, sophisticated, in short, those who do gender in ways that display possession of stylistically refined cultural habitus. This was corroborated by Fairclough's CDA framework by scrutinizing the choice of adjectives like resilient, persistent, clever, cat lady. Phrases like she can dare, she can hustle, she's muscle, choose your twinkle, and mood choice that she conveyed a show of strength, grit, and independence. The last question requiring a probe is when the depiction of women in commercials on workwear jewelry beckons to empowered womanhoods. Implications do workwear jewelry advertisements as fields have on the gendered habitus of working women? So I move to the next section, which I have titled At Home with Belated Personhoods. In India, the traditional discourses which influence women's position in their families Transience in her parental home, marriage as destiny, and motherhood as a sense of legitimacy, a source of legitimacy, they are all used as themes in jewelry advertisements. Many advertisements portray the doting father of the wedding jewelry decked bride beaming in pride, husbands gifting their wives on special occasions, therefore clearly demonstrating the elective affinity between capitalism and patriarchy in such conspicuous consumption. Consumption becomes a midwife to deliver patriarchy out of the womb of capitalism. Relational affinity gets muddled with the entry of lightweight workwear range of jewelry commercials, a market segment targeted at and navigated mostly by the urban working women. In order to unravel, endorsements in some way, they borrow modern concerns with the discourse which produce the modern Indian woman that cannot be understood outside a modernity which is both culturally specific and is also highly gendered. In order to unravel the complex relationship, the present study first takes up discourse analysis of two Tanishq multimedia commercials, namely a Tanishq Miraya brand advertisement and a Tanishq solitaire advertisement. 2017 Tanishq Miraya commercial, girlfriends are seen singing a birthday song to the fourth, celebrating her 40th birthday in the presence of friends and family. The women sing a song pointing out milestones in her life, college times when waist size was 22, married, children, basically life happened. But at 40, with husband now well trained, children now grown up, and the birthday girl now a boss at her office, it's time to celebrate with Mariah jewelry. The advertisement ends with the three women presenting the birthday girl a beautiful Mariah necklace. In Tanishq solitaire advertisement, a middle-aged lady walks through the corridors, of an educational institution. She sits in the library, commanding a certain deference from the students. The bold out of blue moment comes when, at the very end of the advertisement, she enters the classroom and sits in the students' gallery. The voiceover in the commercial tells us that she is a paid CEO now pursuing her dream of learning a film course. As her son begs her to return because his father is cooking every day, the voiceover adds that she is at home as the lady raises a hand, responding to her attendance call, the solitaire shining bright on her finger. It's evident that even though women use the language of individual choice, they do not favor a form of individualism that liberates them from family obligations, nor do they find their families to be always oppressive of their freedom. Rather, they are motivated to inspire other women to seek their own choices only and only when their responsibilities to the collectivity, their families, are fulfilled. In other words, the imagination for some middle-aged women to be shown as autonomous, authoritative, and competent in the public realm is found to be more readily affordable and relatable. In fact, the middle adult years characterized as more progressive for women demonstrates that it is only at certain times, and it's very important that it's only at certain times of their lives that untraditional roles and behaviors are considered to be more appropriate than others. Now, the leads in the Miraya and the Tanishq Solitaire advertisements are undeniably modern in celebrating their womanhood, but these are not decoupled from patriarchal standards of ideal roles that are believed to suit women at specified junctures in their life courses. Miraya, meaning vibrant and lively in Hebrew, brand launched by Tanishq in 2017, is projected for the woman who feels free to celebrate every color of life, be it 20, 30, or 40. It is to do with wisp, gray, and everything to do with attitude. The gender of the ladies in the advertisements is therefore rendered relational. This is akin to a Bourdieusian perspective which considers gender as a socially variable entity carrying different amounts of symbolic capital throughout a woman's life. The brand Miraya seems to sell a certain idea of empowerment, which comes at the end of a long road, which the woman has to endure, performing her duties and obligations as a wife, a mother, and a caregiver. It's after all easy to ask a woman to celebrate life with colors and to do away with age, which is merely a number. Simultaneously, to ask the woman to forget her sweet 16 in lieu of a magical 40s is a kind of stereotyping ageism. Here that the societal regulation of delaying any independent strides on the part of women finds a perfect fit with a more mutated and patriarchy, which grants autonomy to women when the richest fertilization of women, both in terms of their bodies and minds, they're believed to be on the wane. This is apparently a more humane patriarchy, yet one which extracts from women their supposedly best productive, and I will say in brackets, reproductive years. Socially speaking, then, it follows that sometimes a woman is a woman and sometimes she's much less so. In some contexts, being a woman gets converted from a liability to advantage at certain distinct stages, as in the Miraya and Tanish Solitaire commercials month. So the themes of Miraya and Tanish commercials seem to be guided by the contemporary libertarians' views of freedom, which is largely determined by the absence of external impediments. Once women have completed their familial role, once women subtly maneuver their gendered identity, once obstacles in the outer public domain are put at a distance, she will consume guilt-free, leading them to their profound empowerment. In fact, women are projected as inspiring only when they seek their individuality after having completed their gender role functions. But the uncomfortable question which nags is whether the so-called negation of outer barriers at all leads to the self-development of women involving changes in affective taste, their emotional coloration with which they experience the world. And this women's freedom thus requires that we reflect upon internal impediments to exercising choice as well as tangible obstacles to its realization. All empowerment is not merely about gaining economic independence. It is much more about self-actualization, self-realization, and having a number of choices. That the meaning of women's independent identities can well be deferred by patriarchal machinations, that has disempowering effects on women's apparent freedoms. Empowerment involves recognizing some experiences as ongoing expressions of resistance to power. In fact, the power to give voice to one's aspiration to be heard is not so much the removal of an external impediment as the beginning of an internal empowerment. So, ironically, in the jewelry commercials, seemingly privileged of urban working women seek their personhoods in terms of ideal versions of femininity and appear less interested in resisting hindrances to internal freedom, as though women are ready to choose select freedoms of their own volition only when society deems it right to exercise their choices. So from here, I move to the next section, which I have titled Working Women and Unsure Freedoms. When discourses on consumption and women's independence intersect in jewelry advertisements, it only seems natural that consumerism is portrayed both as a choice and a source of women's empowerment. It is true that for a new generation of when women, contemporary feminism is about judgment-free pleasure wherein they can consume guilt-free. Equally true that consumerism, as the cultural logic of capitalism, is the ideological and practical means to producing hegemonic domination of the exploitative system of global capitalism. Not only is consumption in a capitalist world or context a fundamentally unfeminist thing, the fact that advertisements breed paternalist ideologies, even in the workplace, as a cog in the patriarchal wheel, flagrantly problematic. For untying the freedoms on the part of women, the jewelry commercials express, I scrutinized two commercials, namely the Saisha commercial of 2021 of the new diamond wedding jewelry collection of PC Chandru Jewelers, Best at Work, Mia at Ad, and a Mia Sutra commercial. Saisha depicts how a rather grumpy office boss morphs into a doting father-like figure at his office junior Shalini's wedding as she gets married off in his office. Shalini, bedecked in her bridal attire and glittering PC Chandru diamonds, sulks over her missing parents when the marriage registrar asks for witnesses on the bride's side. The boss offers to be one, to be Saisha. Saisha means shadow of God, lending the emotional bride his shoulders to cry upon. The commercial subtly reckons the message that men play roles akin to gods in women's life. The visual components of the advertisement, including Shalini's wallowing up anxiety at overhearing her boss's threatening voice over a voice call, her to-be husband's forthrightness in willing to be the bride's witness, and Shalini's boss's Saisha moment, convey the foundational cultural message about women's powerlessness and the significance of men and, more importantly, the family in her well-being. Shalini must be a working woman, inhabiting an incredibly classic cultural habitus and earning economically in her own stead. Yet, the indispensability of men, their power to shape women's life even in the workplace, and the significance of women's orientation even in her professional space speaks volumes on her secondary position in society at large. There are jewelry commercials which are more progressive. For example, the Mia Workwear line, where a voiceover scorns at all stereotypes men nurture about their female colleagues, because these are, after all, the last thing on my mind. And this is the tagline of the Mia ad, the last thing on my mind. The commercial portrays young women, somewhat already winners, because they are seen breaking traditional stereotypes as a juggle amongst their various roles. The jewelry is seen as liberating a far break from its gendered history in traditional matrimonial adornments. In fact, every workwear lines do bring about a politics of choice for women in investing them with a sense of agency. Yet, one way to use Fairclough's discourse analysis of visual components, the work of women in the Last Thing on My Mind campaign is found to be spirited, presumably because the men in their lives are invisibilized in the ad. Casually attired young intern who works in the office as if she owns the place. The woman in invisible formal Western office wear juggling to get herself ready for office along with her child. The lady in Indian apparel who gets promotion and does bother about her male colleagues calling her a chick at her back. The woman who drags her heavy boxes out of the elevator are all suitably modern. It is, after all, the spirit of working woman which gets lauded in the mere advertisement. But women make the difference without much ado, without making a noise about it. But it's true that a silent reform is much powerful, and perhaps as structured as spoken language leaves us room to doubt whether women in being game to the kind of autoeroticism which jewelry offers lean more to describing a soft femininity in moving rather noiselessly and a bit too unobtrusively. The woman holds on to persuasion when the pregnant lady in the same Mia advertisement, much to her colleague's chagrin, makes a point when she drags a chair to the boardroom meeting, softly saying, and this is what she has to say, and I quote, "They forgot to inform me," end quote. Bargain, carefully drifting past a confrontation, quiet social mission. Of course, the working woman is a to reckon with. She is a figure of determinacy, of a maturely crafted identity, of substance and substantiality. Yet, in the mere advertisement, she chooses to ignore all the taunts, jibes, ridicules they make without batting her eyelid. She chooses to take things on her stride because the notions they have of women being not good at work, because they cannot juggle between the office and home, her colleagues get a kick by shooting their mouths too quick, the jibe that she will soon get married and go on a maternity leave, the endless debate whether the girl should work late, that she should dress according to her profession, is after all the last thing on her mind. The shade of the yellow metal, radiant and glowing, is also bright in the ambivalences that the possession or acquisition of jewelry by women reveals. The advertisement campaigns of workwear jewelry lines selling empowerment for women debunk the complex politics of constructions on gender and class. The Last Thing on My Mind campaign undoubtedly promises to feature and celebrate real women, meaning women who, in one way or other, deviate from traditional beauty standards. The uber cool intern who wears very short hair, the corporate office worker dabbing her eyeliner in a rushed cab drive, the lady navigating the suburban railway to reach office. They represent women on the go. Cast as tall, thin, fair, flawless, the kind of women that are projected in the bridal jewelry advertisements. Indeed, women are captured in their multiple roles, which is, in their complex and multiple roles, which is a with, a third wave feminism, which revels in the ability of women to choose between the private and public realm, or both, or neither. Depicting a woman in a boardroom does not really capture her ability and success. For no matter how hard they fight stereotypes, working women solidifies with the patriarchal voiceover in advertisements, in dealing with the copious share of reviews, taunts, and criticisms which comes her way. The fact that commercials show stories of resilience of working women in everyday life brings to the fore the ruse for anxiety which her adopting Western lifestyle related to her sexuality would otherwise endanger. However, the secular politics of liberation is called into question each time jewelry commercials in the patriarchal warn, conjuring that after all, a complete rejection of the familial sphere is alien and undesirable for women. This is well expressed in the Mia Sutra ad, which asks three visibly uppity, urban, and financially well endowed real life women, namely Banasha, an image consultant and integrative therapist, Natasha, a luxury fashion and lifestyle influencer, and Simone, entrepreneur and mommy influencer, share their take on Mangal Sutras. And we know what the profession of these women, their dispositions that convey their possessing, distinctive cultural capital. Now, the Mangal Sutra, which instantly serves as a visual marker of marriage for a Hindu married woman, is worn to ensure the long life of a husband, and that counts as sentimental jewelry. When voiceover in the Mia Sutra advertisement asks how three young ladies would want the design of Mangal Sutras to be if they were to design. Banasha says she would prefer something minimal and classy. Simone wishes for a kid-proof and stylish one, while Natasha wants it to be something that can be stacked with other jewelry. Made for the modern millennial woman and tailored for her office look, Mia Sutra's tagline, traditions stay, expressions change, speaks of the coveted modernness of its creation. Banaishi, Natasha, and Simone wear their Mangal Sutras happily as they feel motivated to value the love, support, and encouragement that they receive within the family, from their family. End of the advertisement, Simone asks, "This is well. Uh, Mia Sutra being more mom friendly, is an authentic quote, though the it is paired with Simone cradling her child, as the latter plays with her jewelry, seems wildly out of place. In that very moment, the commercial seems to revert back to the classic representation of the prime role of the woman as a mother, deserving more focus than self-love. The three young ladies, ostensibly from financially privileged, socially distinctive upper class backgrounds, are doing urbanity, which requires a distance from expensive heavyweight and gaudy jewelry to maintain their refined images. But their sophisticated gendered habitus feigns an innocence in asking them to extol a part of their womanhood and sit back on their personhood. This is again a very admired, gender disposition in India. In all, the independence of women exposed in the ideology behind the commercials is an unsure one. Often women do appear as consumers, and that alludes to their economic freedoms. But these are uncomfortably perched on the demurely crafted gendered habitus which women display. So the idea of economic independence, which workwear jewelry brands sell, therefore gives us enough reason to suspect about the very ideology behind it. Moreover, in glorifying inspirational womanhoods by creating a market segment in workwear jewelry, it dupes women to believe in an idea of empowerment which merely heightens schisms between femininity and feminine, begging vis-a-vis workwear jewelry, the traditional versus the modern. The real dispute is not a matter of distinguishing the modern from the traditional, as so much from competing and sometimes irreconcilable versions of what could be taken as truly inspirational. So I come to the last segment of my paper, which I have titled the subsection, Does Refined Habitus Disempower Indian Urban Women? So it's not my contention to argue characterization of Indian women in the advertisements under study finds fit with Bourdieu's idea of gendered habitus, wherein he argues that women accept sexism because of their feminine dispositions. Far from it. The fact that the cultural habitus of women interacts and contests with other fields of action, notably their working spheres, demonstrate that assumed feminine characteristics for women at large and subject dispositions tightly tied to social practices is constructive. This does not, however, take away the fact that female accounts as negative capital in several instances. In this context, it has been argued that in general, the impact of femaleness as negative capital may be assumed to decline in direct proportion to the amount of other forms of symbolic capital amassed. Clearly not the case in commercials. Educated urban working women depicted in commercials basically have no dearth of cultural capital. Unfortunately, though, its possession does not necessarily lead to the production of symbolic capital as would have been anticipated. Here that inequalities in capital are reproduced for working women. The fact that cultural capital fails to get converted into symbolic capital leads systematic disempowerment to be engendered. Once and when one's cultural capital is delegitimated, then it cannot be traded as an asset. Here, the refined cultural habitus which women in advertisements are depicted to possess cannot be capitalized upon, and its power becomes limited. Rather, her refined upper class cultural habitus lends room to advertisers to characterize her gendered presence as resilient, not exactly assertive, as modern and not exactly Western, as willfully patient and not exactly a go-getter. In a way, then, gendering women's cultural habitus shuns them from adopting powerful gestures, taking aggressive moves, and embracing imminent decisions. Moreover, in a changing world, imagining a working woman always putting her femaleness to the fore is and who someone who's moderate and tempered in disposition unavoidably bids well for a more mutated patriarchy. An Anjali diamond jewellery multimedia advertisement where three young women are shown engaging in small talk on their diamond rings. The understandably empowered woman in spectacles, she listens sitting pensively as the other two ladies gloating that their diamonds are heirlooms and that have been passed on through generations and are gifts from their father and grandfather, respectively. Towards the end of the commercial, the quiet third slowly and firmly adds that hers is a prized one too, in which she chose and purchased for herself out of her own money from an Anjali jeweler store. The first two ladies, they with the Veblenien viewpoint or standpoint, I would say, that women as primary conspicuous consumers function socially as a marker of their men's pecuniary prowess. In other words, women's consumption works to glorify the men who provided them with the means to consume the diamonds in the first place. Now, the freedom which the lady wearing the Anjali diamond jewelry exercises marks a sharp break from the patriarchal narrative. It's one which is recognized by the other two ladies who half regretfully side glance at each other, signifying that women's decision making in consumption and her financial independence is justifiably laudable. An important caveat here. The diamond ring instantly becomes a sign implicated in class identity construction, where diamonds are intelligible to other class sign readers. So while lady with the diamond, wearing the Anjali diamond does make a breakaway from the patriarchal trappings, she cannot avoid, her gendered habitus, which asks her to display femininity in tandem with the first two. It also instills the idea that, among other things, that women must consume if they want to be women in the first place and independent in the second. Diamond is indeed one. The lady with the Anjali ring is a rebel, but quietly so. She is a listener first, and it is only when the other two chirpy women ask her about her diamond does she reply. In a way, her cultured habitus asks her not to be aggressive. Her bodily dispositions, a tasteful sari, neatly tied up bun, spectacles, her patience and resilience makes her stand apart. These in no way, of course, disempower her in any way. But the cultural habitus does delimit the way in which she states her stance in a certain way. So the fact of class position is not only the only determinant of women's life opportunities. The available evidence shows that gender is a core determinant, gender is core determinant, which has discriminatory influence on their lives in spite of women's privileged positions. This form of gender intersectionality, where gender and class in terms of gendered habitus are coupled together to have deleterious bearings on any other advantages that women may possess and or experience. So I now conclude my paper. I'll go to the conclusion that the commissions examined in this study clearly reveal that urban working women in India prefer clean, classy, and affordable gold and diamond jewelry designs over heavier ornate ones. The factoring of intersectionality in workwear jewelry commercials in terms of class and gender show that it is the urban middle class working woman who enjoys maximal privileges. Jewelry advertisements demonstrate how women who are women make up a category which is incredibly classist, vis-a-vis modern, Yet women end up earning labels like "you are gold," "every woman a diamond," demonstrating that women's identities are ultimately objectified and rendered saleable in the market. Moreover, the handmaiden of a refined cultural habitus not only induces women to seek selective freedom, further disempowering them. So it is needless to argue that no matter how progressive their characterization in commercial narratives are, these end up in dovetailing and accommodating a sobered patriarchy. The financial empowerment of working women has led to a positional shift in the hierarchy of social status, which is granted to them. The shift in male thinking, and I would say of society, seems distant. Of course, the boundaries of old patriarchies, they are suffering controlled, but an unsettling of the same seems far away. This is since the initiative to break gender barriers is always negotiated within the structural ambit of gender. So with empowerment, albeit their ideal empowerment, determined by societal modes and preferential norms in jewelry commercials, has become a twisted and gainful marketing strategy in the world of advertisements. The very idea of empowerment seems to be informed by a Maurinian logic, where the logics of subject interpretations of, with independence in terms of elimination of internal impediments, this week, societal status accorded to her, that remains actually co-constitutive of each other. In between this contestation, it is a supposedly naively masked patriarchy, which in using the proviso of inspiration, ultimately pulls the strings in creating suitable versions of modern womanhood. Thank you so much, all of you, for your patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Das Chaudhuri, for your interesting and in-depth deliberation. Now I would request Professor Sanjay Roy to conduct the rest of the session. Sir, over to you.
Friends, you have listened to Runa's presentation. Very interesting, I thought, and quite unusual. I mean, not too many sociologists work on this field, so that's very enlightening. And she has looked at the jewelry advertisement from gender perspective, uh, both sides, covering both sides, how it tends to reproduce sort of femininity, gender identities, and so on. And she has hinted how the subjective interpretations and although she hasn't used the term like subversion, subjective subversion could also find a place in this textual narratives. She has hinted, right? Now let's have some discussion. Let's have some questions from the audience before we could conclude this session. So I request the participants to come up with their observations and questions.
Can I ask one?
Yes, yes,
Am I audible? Can you hear me?
yes,
Luna?
yes, yes.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Thank you, Luna, for such wonderful paper, and I enjoyed listening to you.
Thank you, sir.
But that also leaves me wondering at some point, as we often, look at modernity, particularly in the context of India, as we have mentioned, that there could be different traditions of modernity, right? Uh, Therefore, I was struck by your constant laboring between tradition and modernity, uh, largely associating patriarchy with the former, right, tradition. Uh, Although you did talk about towards the end about the unique experiences of modernity in this part of the world as well, as you finished your presentation, which leads me to sort of ask this question, try to frame it somewhere along this line that uh, can there be, uh, can there be expressions of patriarchy which are peculiarly modern? In other words, uh, does this kind of a study lead us to uh, sort of make this stranglehold of patriarchy being always identified as something which is, kind of something which is outside of modern? And precisely what I'm trying to put is that does modernity engender its own patriarchy?
Yes, sir. That's the question, sir. So yes, thank you, sir, for that question. I think modernity does engender its own patriarchy, and that we need to, of course, there are patriarchies. As I have hinted, as you said, towards the end of my paper, that this is, I think, a more sobered patriarchy, a more tempered down patriarchy. And I'm not associating patriarchy with the idea of tradition, but this is a modern patriarchy, which in some ways gives women, uh, makes or permits their women, I would say, permits their women to seek a certain idea of ideal empowerment vis-a-vis modernity at specified junctures in their life courses. So, what I would say, I mean, this is a very niche clientele, right? I mean, the women whom I have discussed in my paper, they are privileged, and I would say not only privileged, they are pre-privileged. Because they have veritably kind of inherited their upper class dispositions as part of what I would call original habitus, if I were to borrow both those terms. And there is a way in which their suave manners, their urban mores, anglophone attitudes, they're all part of a cultural habitus, and that leads one to believe that these would be women who, in their occupational roles, they would not, hesitate to, uh, you know, um, step over, notions of gender conformity. Unfortunately, this is what that does not happen. And I think that's partly because of the patriarchy, of the overarching idea of patriarchy, under which they are required to operate in some or the other way. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that uh, patriarchy uh, can be traditional, can be, patriarchies can be associated with the so-called idea of the traditional, but if patriarchies are negotiating with an idea of modernity, then uh, they appear to, kind of bargain a sort of a relationship with an idea of a modern womanhood, which they are tailoring for their women. Okay, so if we were to think of it, I mean, just from your question, I was just intrigued to think about this. That when I was referring to Irving Goffman, say, for instance, that it is after all the job of the advertiser and the society to, to render the opaque going ons into easily readable form. I am now thinking about the people who actually do the advertisements or direct the advertisements. If we look at the world of advertisements and then look at the world of directors who are actually projecting the so-called women, they are again also males. And by saying that, I'm not saying that they have a certain take on womanhood for that matter. But at the same time, this will have ramifications on the way they think that society would find a more perfect fit with the way in which patriarchies operate. Every at each point, whether it be the Saisha moment, of course, Saisha is shadow of God. There is a way in which the boss, the rather of grumpy office boss, turns into a very, lends the emotional bride his shoulders and turns into a father. So it is almost as if, so we must forget at any point that emotional coloration, it is the affective orientation with which women are actually associated. It is not the other way around. So women are resilient, that's fine, but they are strong-willed, that's also fine, but they're not exactly uh, they're not exactly as competent as men are. The real problem, sir, I think, is that in many ways the modern patriarchies, if you were to say the modern patriarchies, and they have really modern attitudes, that has, that women in very challenging positions because the woman has to choose between unacceptable alternatives, and she expected always to do too much, and she's always expected to do more than men. And that, I think, is a modes of disempowerment. And in a certain way, there is a way in which the naively masked modern patriarchy, if you were to say, it pulls it, it is actually the one who is, it is, I'm not saying that women are puppets in their hands. Women do have their voice, they do have their voice, but that voice always needs an interlocutor. And the interlocutor is the male voiceover. And not necessarily the voiceover is could be many. It could be chiming sexist messages uh, at one stand. There are men, of course, who are coming forthright to help the woman. Say, for instance, in Shalini's case, her to-be husband's forthrightness in, you know, um, being, forwarding himself as the witness on the bride's side. So I think that modernity, in a certain sense, it endangers a certain form of patriarchy, which grants women autonomy, I think, only at specified junctures in their individual biographies. So that is my take. I do not know whether that answers your question, but yes, there is a way in which modernity endangers a certain notion of patriarchy, and this is, of course, a very limited segment about. This is a very niche clientele, as I'm always mentioning. This is not really the whole of India, but if you were to say that the sociology of elites, there is an equality and power from the top as well. So that is what I think maybe answers the question. Thank you, sir, for the question.
Is there any other question from the audience? Is there any other question? Inviting questions from the audience. Okay, I have an observation, Runa.
Yes,
This is methodological. Like, you see, point is that, say, let's take advertisements of different kinds as text. And your presentation is more or less textual analysis or text analysis. So yeah, the problem is that if you try to capture the gender questions by textual analysis, then there is a problem because unless you bring in the points of negotiation, like how the advertisement work in the psyche of the consumer, both men and I mean even uh, jewelry consumption by women are endorsed by the society and by the family and men as well. So it's not women in isolation that decide about the consumption of jewelry. So there is a large scale social endorsement. So unless you bring about that points of negotiation, like how women culturally, socially, differentially located, they respond to this text of advertising. So if we go by common sense, the responses could be differential. Like we can't expect a uniform kind of responses and reflections, and that will impact their consumption behavior as well, in turn. So advertisement cannot be, a complete kind of foundation for, uh, getting a square view of gender consumption and how to understand the feminist question through the consumption of jewelry and advertisement in particular. So that is, I was wondering whether you have ignored the possibilities of subversions and negotiations. So it is impossible to admit that the advertisements work on the psyche and
Yes,
habitus of
they
the
do. They do.
consumer in an uniform way. Okay, it's very difficult one.
Yes.
Second point is that these texts have authors. You were answering to Amit's
Yes.
question, and you referred to like there is an advertisement industry.
Hmm. Yes, sir. I
The
did
team
refer.
is working. They are doing research. I don't have any understanding of their like theoretical understanding or discursive understanding of the consumption and things like that. But they have some compulsion also, compulsion to adhere to certain standards. Like one compulsion could be to promote consumption. So they work for the jewelry sellers,
Hmm.
okay, the industry,
Hmm.
right? It could be
Yes.
tarnished or whatever other. So
Hmm.
they are guided by an interest to promote sales. So that could be one. Second could be to meet the aesthetic standard because there is an aesthetic side of advertisement also. Like whether you get influenced or not, at least you have a look at the billboards and so on. So it could be some leaving some kind of aesthetic influence or say aesthetic standards for the general public. You may be a consumer or not. So what kind of discourses they are guided? The authors of the advertising. That could be something that because we who don't understand anything about advertising, or at least not experts on advertising, we don't know about it actually. What are the standards that guide them to produce the text of advertising?
Hmm.
So these are the two questions.
Yes. Thank you, sir, for the questions, firstly. As far as question of textual subversion and also the mutual negotiation. Say, for instance, I mean, I am impelled to the idea of the reader response theory because you were saying that what I have actually done is reading texts, and that will not give me a full understanding or a complete understanding of how is it that men and women who watch these television commercials, what is it, what the ramifications of these advertisements would be on their consumptive practices? And I'm just recalling that even, there are some jewelry brands which are also, tailoring some kinds of jewelry for men these days. I mean, since we were putting up this question, yes, of course, the reader, the response part of the project in advertisements has been largely left out in my paper. That I completely agree. There are two things which I mentioned in the methodologic method part of my paper. That is, I had actually, left out all print media commercials, and looked at multimedia campaigns which have both visual and verbal cues. So that is one, qualification which I adopted early on because when I looked at the Max Quarter 11 software, I found that they had separate codes, for the um, for the visual and the verbal cues. And there were questions. There were ways in which you could mold these questions. You could put those codes in place and actually record the number of times these things were mined. See, for instance, in the last thing on my mind campaign, the use of the pronoun mine. Repeatedly you have, that is actually breaking away from, the question of gender stereotypes. So I would say this is largely a methodological, um, adoption that I've taken, because if I had, also included print media commercials in my paper, then the scope of the paper would have been too much, and I needed to delimit that. That actually require me to do a separate, because I now recall the number of advertisements that you find in everyday newspapers on new occasions, say for example the Valentine's Day or the or Mother's Day, and these are new occasions for us. I mean, 40 years down the memory lane, we would never have imagined, jewelry lines to promote such kinds of advertisements. So yes, I have left out the print media, and that has actually led me to, look only at multimedia campaigns. And the response part of the story, I think, would require yet another deliberation, because that would actually require me to do, some kind of field work. This is yes, it is absolutely true what you're saying, that this is absolutely textual interpretation and nothing more than that. And that too, because these are subjective, I try to use a software which would lend me some kind of, what I would say, validity and reliability of results. I was actually very, suspicious as to how, even if you're using a software that does not really guarantee you that the codes that you have used will actually lend you a correct analysis. And that's the reason I use the CDF framework alongside the MaxWorder 11 software. I just wanted to see whether using both these methods, I was getting the same result. So I was actually testing the reliability of the software by using the CDF framework. And thankfully, most of the results or the findings that I arrived at were more or less uh, similar. I wouldn't say they were same, but they were similar. So that gave me the confidence to arrive at my arguments. So that is one thing. Of course, looking at the response part of the thing would be an interesting story, because there would be many other narratives uh, that I think that women would come up with when it relates to the gender question in the advertisement. So say, for example, in the Max Porter analysis, you have who is buying the jewelry, right? So is it the daughter for the mother, the husband for the wife, the father for the daughter, the bride, who's also the daughter. So that is one. That is how I would like to answer your first question. And the second part is that when I was answering Professor Amitesh Mukhopadhyay's question, I had referred to the authors of the um, advertisements, and I had also mentioned that they are males, and they would have a separate take. But when I did the literature of review, I found that jewelry, first of all, does not really account for a. There have been very few and far between analysis of jewelry commercials in the first place. That's one. But there are marketing strategies, there are promotion strategies, and the advertisers themselves, they are under a lot of compulsions. That is one, the authors. But each of them think that jewelry commercials, they strategically they portray women in very inspiring roles, and this inspiration is usually taken, when the advertiser, the author of the advertiser, say for example, is actually positing this idea of inspiration, either the two ways. One is, of course, it is either taken as a positive continuity of endless, sacrifice, or the bad infinity of what I would call extolling individuality and quality of sacredness, in inspiration. There is that is very awe-inspiring. And since I'm presenting in a research committee which has to do with the sociology of the everyday, I must say that the advertisers are actually putting much emphasis on the idea of inspiration, vis-a-vis, I would say, also modern and sacred. And the sacred in itself, is very awe-inspiring. As a sociologist, led by the Humayun understanding, it's very awe-inspiring, and that's in contrast to what we would understand as the mundane or the everyday. So, what I would like to say is that the rigid femininity, which is mired with inspirational qualities, that in some ways, renders these consumptive practices of everyday workwear jewelry very complex. I think the ways in which the commercials, the authors of the commercials portray a certain way of thinking, and the way in which you are saying that it is received at the other end, requires therefore to be deliberated upon. But I think largely that there is a way in which the advertisers, the authors, they in spite of all the kinds of um, you know um, you know they have their own, I would, I don't know the word to use. I mean, they have their own ways of working
Grammar.
operations. That, yes, that there's grammar. There's a grammar. The way in which they operationalize things, they in the way in which they think about things. Yes, it's there. But at the end of the the narrative seems to tell us that women can do too many things. That women are asked to do and too many things at the same time, to multitask, and to perform multiple roles. That actually puts them into the, I would say, the virtuous orbit of uh, you know inspiration, and that I think is very problematic. And that is what I tried to interrogate in my paper. So that's my take on your question.
Yes. So is there any other question from the audience? I can see that there are still 27 odd participants in today's seminar. So is there any other observation, question from the audience? Professor Chaudhuri is there? No, I don't think. Okay, then if there is no other question, so let me thank Runa for volunteering to be a speaker in our group. It was a fantastic experience listening to you. I haven't heard you before, so I was fascinated. So keep up with your good work that you are doing, and keep publishing your work. I'd like to thank Pinaki, who has been the convener of this program, organizing lecture, at least one lecture every month. And this month we had two lectures, fortunately. And the next month also we'll have some speakers. There were around 35 participants, so that's encouraging. So if we can keep that level, 30 plus is a good audience like seminars. And I'd like to thank Moitri also, who has been a source of our inspiration, the president of Indian Sociological Society, and who has been insisting that we must continue with this program. And she also insisted that we put our flyer in the ISS website. So I don't know whether there are members outside our group who have participated in today's lecture. But maybe there are some, it's very difficult to ascertain who are from within and who are from outside. But we are all part of the larger body called Indian Sociological Society. So thank everybody. Thank you so much.
It was an honor, sir, to be here and to present my paper here. Thank you so much. And thanks to Pinaki also. I forgot to thank him, sorry, towards the beginning of the lecture. Yes, thank
This is
you.
not end of it. You can speak on a different occasion also in future. Okay.
Thank
So an invitation in advance. Thank you all participants. We'll meet next month sometime. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.